Welcome to the Cotton Club Radio. I'm your host, Jacob Cotton. Before we get into this information, I'm going to need y'all to like and subscribe to this channel. Without further ado, we're going to break it down. We're going to talk about some hot stuff tonight. There's a lot of stuff I'm going to get into. I'm going to break it down so it can't be broken down no more. Ladies and gentlemen, tonight's topic is, should Black Americans receive reparations for slavery and Jim Crow segregation in America? I'm going to repeat that. Should Black Americans receive reparations for slavery and Jim Crow segregation in America? I want to kick this conversation off with this wealth gap situation. I think this wealth gap is probably the ugliest thing about the entire conversation surrounding reparations. The wealth gap between Black Americans and white Americans is not just disgusting, but it's rather extreme, to be honest with you. You know, it symbolizes the accumulated effects of 4 centuries of institutional and systematic racism and bears major responsibility for the disparities in income, health, education, and opportunities that continue to this day. On average, the Black household makes up to about 13.6% of all of U.S. households, but holds only about 1% of wealth. That's a problem. That's a problem, y'all. And the median of a Black family, the average Black family, is about $24,500. And that's about 1/10 of the median wealth of a white household, who's bringing in about $250,000. I'm going to let y'all sit on that and let that marinate, people. In 2022, for every $100 a white household brought in, a Black household brought in $15. I'm going to repeat that because I know it's a few people who, maybe some folks, they got hearing aids or whatever the situation may be. In 2022, for every $100 a white household brought in, a Black household brought in $15. I know some of y'all surprised and some of us ain't. So we know that there's a wealth gap between the two groups. So the question is now, what the hell do we do? Going to continue to pretend that there isn't a race issue or there isn't a wealth gap issue? This brought me to the conversation of reparations. The number one problem about reparations isn't white American fear of Black Americans getting money and spending it in all kinds of silly ass ways. Simply the idea that white Americans feel like, well, they didn't enslave anyone, so why should their tax dollars be toward giving a handout to Black Americans? There is something definitely wrong with that statement. But I'll say this. Well, you did not enslave anyone. Your community did benefit from the enslavement of Black Americans, even to this day. So the American government is responsible for keeping Black Americans in slavery. So you are part of that government. So guess what? You pay. You pay. All right. And I know that sounds horrible for some people, but we got to talk about it. For so long, the white community in America was able to kind of segregate themselves into their own bubbles and not have to pay attention to what was going on in Black America. They knew what was going on, of course. I mean, it's not a secret, but they turned a blind eye. They could put their blindfolds on and their earmuffs on and act like they didn't know what was going on. But that's over. We're not doing that no more. We have to act like we all know what's going on. And we're not going to pretend like we don't know what's going on in the Black community any longer. That's a thing of the past. It's 2024. So, while addressing that, let's move on with the conversation. Let's tackle the myth that slavery ended in 1865. Not only is this a huge misconception, but it seems to be the narrative that's being ran with by mainstream media and people who are in their bubbles and don't know real history. They just kind of circulate this kind of false narrative just to make themselves feel better. But let's talk about it. Slavery did not end in 1865. In fact, it continued under a different name. Thus, Black Americans need reparations for the damages done to them for 246 years of free labor, 100 years of lynching, another 40 years of prisoner leasing, people. Prisoner leasing. All right? See, this is one thing that kind of teased me off when we talk about the conversation of reparations and slavery. People seem to think that, slavery ended with the Emancipation Proclamation and then it was just kudos for the black community. And that's just the biggest lie. Prisoner leasing was a real thing, man. It was said to be just as bad as slavery. When prisoner leasing started, they would literally just be kidnapping people up off the street. So if you were a black person who was looking for a place to live because you left your plantation, you could be arrested for loitering. So this is when they started to become, where you saw the police state start to rise during the prisoner leasing period, where black people would just be criminalized for next to nothing, just so they could be pillaged and targeted for prisoner leasing. And one more thing I want to say about prisoner leasing before I move on and just dive a little deeper into reparations. See, the thing about the prisoner leasing is that that's a chapter of Black American history that seems to be jumped over. You hear about slavery, you hear about the Jim Crow era, segregation, etc. But that prisoner leasing was real wicked, man. There are countless, thousands of letters. This is a historical fact. There are countless letters of women in particular, black women, eloquent women, very, very intelligent. And that's another thing we'll talk about later, about this misconceived notion that former slaves were illiterate and docile and dumb. That's a myth. That's not true at all. How do we know that? Because there were letters written by African American, black American women to the government, to the United States government, to the president. And these letters are telling. They're haunting of the effect that was happening with this prisoner leasing situation. And these letters, many of these women are talking about how their sons, their brothers, their husbands, their uncles, their fathers are disappearing. There were many stories about prisoner leasing that, moved me in a lot of different ways, but it was one story in particular about this woman that really, really, really touched me. And I'll keep it short. So there was this woman who they found, hundreds of letters from this black American woman who was a former slave and a very educated woman. There's no record of her having any a college education or anything like that. She was very literate, wrote very well. Her letters were very detailed. But her husband had went missing. So the story is, she said that her husband went out to go get some eggs one afternoon and he never returned. And she just couldn't understand where he had gone. They had children and it wasn't like her husband to abandon them, but he never came back. He never came home. And as time went on, she began to notice that there was a consistency of the men around her that were disappearing. And it started to become an epidemic of young, middle-aged men disappearing. And come to find out, many of them were being trafficked into the prison system as forced free labor. And this woman, she never recovered from her husband disappearing, and she would write. She actually was writing the president. A lot of people don't know about that. She was writing the president, telling the president, listen, there is a problem. Our men are being kidnapped and thrown into prisoner leasing and thrown into prisons and being worked to death, and we're never seeing them again. And this woman, in my opinion, was basically an activist. Her letters were a form of activism, but no one talks about that. So, when it comes to prisoner leasing, I just want to put a vocal point on that, because I know a lot of my listeners won't know about that in particular. But we gotta see, the one thing about the Cotton Club radio show is I didn't start this show to play games. I started the show to tell the hidden truths that mainstream media doesn't want to talk about, or you go to school and you're not going to hear about that in your history class or anything like that. But moving forward, we're going to continue with the conversation of reparations. Why this is important, and why we have to, as a country, we have to make this happen. We can no longer just sit back and watch a certain segment of our community just perish from lack of resources. We don't need to deny that there's racism anymore. For all the racism deniers, I get it. It's easier to put on blinders to what's really going on. For my black folks out there, listen, racism ain't going away. It's not going to go anywhere. For the last, few centuries, we've tried to convince a certain population that racism was real. And I've noticed that fell on deaf ears. So we can no longer waste time, because that's just a time wasting tactic. What we can do is focus on solutions that will help us fix our problems. And I'm under the firm belief that reparations would help, resources would help fix our problems. And moving on to the conversation of fixing our problems, do you ever wonder why Black Americans are constantly being told, pull yourself up by your bootstraps? So I just did a little Google research and was not surprised at all the money being allocated through your tax dollars and my tax dollars to help uplift other groups. So let's talk about it. First on the list is the Afghan refugees. We sent $60 million to help relocate Afghan refugees, give them housing, give them grants, etc. And we also spent $62 billion since 2002 into 2023 to help fund Afghan refugees and help them and give them resources. In 2023, America sent $75 billion to help the war in Ukraine. Just a few weeks ago, another bill was passed to send another $60 billion to fight a clear-cut losing war. Let's face it, family. Let's face this. Every time you see the news, the president of Ukraine is begging for money. Not one time did I hear anyone say that the people of Ukraine are lazy for not working to fund their own wars. Not once did you hear people say that they keep asking for handouts. Not once did I hear people mention that we don't have enough resources to support another country's wars. Our politicians are not claiming this country's broke. We just seemingly come up with the money when we need it. And I just find that really contradictory to when it comes to reparations. What I'm hearing most is we don't have the money for reparations. Well, let's continue. Last year, we spent $4.5 billion on the Mexican border crisis, which is irrelevant because now we just opened the border and just allowing everyone in. So that's crazy within itself. The anti-Asian hate crime bill in 2023, we spent $160 million to give them resources and give them a crime bill. They were going through their time of turmoil. Shout out to the Asian community, right? And then we turn around and give another $300 million to the Venezuela migrants to basically come here, start a new life, get housing, get welfare, food stamps, etc. Now it's 2024, and just a few weeks ago, our government sent $26 billion to Israel to help fight a war that most Americans do not support. No public outcry. Nobody's talking about what any of these countries don't deserve. But the moment Black Americans say, hold on. Instead of sending our country's resources abroad, why don't we work on the issues we have domestically? Why don't we use some of those resources and give the people who have been harmed the most a leg up in reparations? Oh, here it goes. It goes right back to the original point. Well, you can pull yourself up by your bootstraps. So, I want to keep it 125%. Going back to reparations. Yes, reparations are due. It's due. The conversation is becoming louder and louder. But what should reparation look like? This is the conversation I want to have. I want to just change this. I want to change the trajectory right now, because we all know reparations is due. I want to define reparations. I know I done talked about it for 30 minutes, but now let me define it. Reparations is the making of amends for a wrong one has done by paying money or otherwise helping those who have been wronged. There is no doubt in my mind that Black America has been done wrong, and that America needs to make an amend for that wrong that has been done. All right? I want it to be clear. Reparations is not a handout. That is another trope that needs to die out. Reparations is a debt to the descendants of the enslaved Africans, enslaved Black Americans, and American freedmen. What is a freedman? A freedman is a former Black American slave emancipated during and after the Civil War by the Emancipation Proclamation and the 13th Amendment. I think that reparations should definitely be a check. All right. I know some people are against that. I'm not against that. I think to be against that is weird. I mean, people need monetary support. You know what I mean? Like, a check would help a lot of people. Okay, we need a check. All right. Land grants. I think a lot of land was taken right after slavery during the Reconstruction period and up until later on. Land being stolen is a very prominent thing in Black American history. All right. So we need some land. You got to give some of that back. All right. We're not going to, you can't continue to deprive us of our resources. This is our country too. We put in the work. All right. Now it's only right that you got to give some of that back. You can't maldistribute all of the resources and think that, we're supposed to just survive on crumbs. That's preposterous. I think that's crazy. So, and free college tuition, I think that would help. I think free college tuition would help. I know it would help. I remember when I was in college, one of my good friends, his mother was Native American, and they lived in Arizona on a reservation, and he was going to college for free. And I thought that was crazy, because I remember a conversation with my grandmother where she told me, we had Cherokee, and so, but nonetheless, right? Free college tuition. Black Americans shouldn't be paying for college. All right. No, we shouldn't have to pay for that. All right. Free money management programs. All right. I think that, with reparations, a lot, many of us would need to know how to utilize assets, stocks, bonds, etc. So we would need to learn money management. That's been one of our biggest issues for a long time. Black Americans didn't have money. So even after slavery into the Reconstruction period, during the Freedmen Bureau, I think that's something that needs to be talked about. Fair housing down payments. All right. I think Black Americans should be given a percentage that they can pay down. That's fair for however much money they have, depending on how much money they earn. All right, I think they should be given fair housing down payments, tax exemptions. Okay, I'm under the firm. I remember people was trolling Terrence Howard because he said, "Man, I'm a descendant of slaves. I shouldn't be paying taxes." You're dang right. You're dang right. All right, I agree. I don't think Black Americans should be paying taxes, bro. We should be having. Come on now, you dig? Our ancestors they paid their taxes. 246 years worth of taxes. You understand? So, and last, I think to protect all of these beauties that reparations could provide, but an anti-black hate crime bill would be necessary to protect these things because unfortunately, we have to keep it 100. We got to keep it 125% correct. We have to keep it that there are contingencies out there who do not want Black Americans to receive reparations, and just the thought of reparations, they look at it as being anti whatever they are. So these are my thoughts about reparations. If you listened all the way through, I appreciate that, and welcome to the Cotton Club Radio. I'm going to be dropping content, so stay tuned, and peace.